Under the night's cloak of betrayal, it wasn't just a marriage that collapsed. It was an entire life built on trust, routine, and the belief in forever. He didn't realize right away who the woman beside him had become. Too bold, too confident, a stranger. When familiar touches vanish and are replaced by passwords, unfamiliar scents, and traces of someone else, what begins isn't suspicion, but realization. He didn't scream. He took action. A detective, photos, proof. But instead of one affair, he uncovered a web of lies. She had been living a separate life and believed she could walk away untouched. She was wrong. He didn't just tear down the house they built. He burned everything to the ground, coldly, precisely, without mercy. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watched this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. Sleep eluded me again. It had become a grim tradition, me lying stiff on the bed, eyes locked on the ceiling, while faint streaks of streetlight filtered through the blinds like fading scars on a dark canvas. My thoughts spun, riddled with doubts I couldn't quiet. Avery lay beside me, breathing in calm, even intervals, her limbs draped haphazardly across the sheets. We'd shared 25 years together, yet that night, I felt like I was lying next to someone I no longer knew. Something felt off. This wasn't the slow drift caused by years of routine or the erosion that time brings to familiarity. No, this was abrupt, jarring, like she'd shed her skin and emerged as someone entirely different. The shift had started in our bedroom. Avery, once reserved and gently predictable, had always found comfort in routine. Her habits were soothing in their consistency, but without warning, that version of her vanished. She grew daring, her actions smooth, practiced even. The way she reached out to me, the sureness in her touch, the words she whispered when the lights were off, none of it resembled the woman I'd once known. It felt like an imposter had taken her place, someone who'd lived a life I hadn't been part of, someone harboring stories she'd never told. I remembered something a buddy once said over drinks. If your wife suddenly flips the switch in bed after 20 years of missionary Mondays, she's either been saved or she's screwing someone else. That thought played on repeat in my mind as I watched her sleep. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe it was just a phase, some late spark brought on by age or boredom. But then came the signs I couldn't ignore. A foreign scent clinging to her clothes, her wardrobe morphing into something tighter, bolder, brasher. Her phone, once forgotten on countertops, now rarely left her hand. She was always typing, always tilting the screen just enough to block my view. And then the passcode, something she'd never needed before. She'd never hidden a thing from me. Now it felt like she was locking me out. My chest felt squeezed, like something was crushing me from the inside. I needed the truth, and I wasn't going to stop until I had it. The next morning, we barely spoke. She stood by the stove, wearing a fitted blouse I didn't recognize, humming softly while pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Good morning?" she offered, eyes still glued to her phone. I replied with a grunt. She didn't look up, just kept scrolling, a subtle smirk playing at her lips, like she thought I was too blind to see it. My jaw clenched. That was the final straw. By lunchtime, I'd made up my mind. I reached out to a private investigator, Jonas Heller. He looked like someone pulled from a black and white detective reel, gray hair slicked back, eyes that had witnessed more betrayal than most could stomach. "So you suspect she's seeing someone else?" he asked, already scribbling into a notebook. "It's not suspicion," I said. "It's certainty." Jonas gave me a look that said he'd heard this all before. "Then let's get you proof." When I left his office, my stomach churned with dread. I didn't need photos to confirm what I already knew in my gut, but I still had to see it. 5 days later, the truth arrived sealed in a plain manila envelope. Jonas slid the folder across the table without saying much. You might want to sit down for this. My hands shook as I undid the clasp, and there she was, Avery, standing in a hotel parking lot, smiling with a man I didn't recognize. They were too close, touching, intimate. I flipped to the next image. They were kissing, the kind of kiss that said this wasn't accidental, it wasn't a lapse in judgment, it was orchestrated, ongoing. A surge of heat rushed through me, rage and sorrow in equal measure. My fists clenched around the edge of the photos, heart hammering in my chest. There's more, Jonas said quietly. I nodded, unable to form words, and turned the pages. More images. More men. It wasn't an affair. It was a double life. A part of her I'd never known. Avery had been living in shadows, and now the spotlight had found her. That night, I waited. She came in late, much too late. I sat at the dining room table, the photographs arranged in front of me like damning evidence at a trial. The moment she stepped inside and saw them, she stopped cold. Her face drained of color. What is this? She stammered, voice brittle. I tapped the stack once. Why don't you explain it to me? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No excuse would do. I pushed back my chair, the scrape of wood on wood loud in the stillness. How long, Avery? I asked. Her eyes welled up. Caleb, please! How long? I roared, slamming my fist on the table. She flinched. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stared at her, the woman I had once built a life around, and I couldn't find a trace of her in that face. You didn't just betray me, I said, voice low. You destroyed everything we built. Then I turned my back and walked out. The divorce papers were filed the very next morning. But I wasn't done. Avery believed she'd covered her tracks. She thought the damage was confined. She had no idea what was coming next. She believed she could commit the worst kind of deceit and walk away untouched. But she underestimated me. I wasn't going to let her disappear without consequence. I was going to take everything, and then finish her. In the aftermath of handing Avery the divorce papers, an eerie calm settled over the house. No screaming, no hysterics. Just a cold, empty silence. She stared at the documents as if they were written in hieroglyphics. One evening, as we sat opposite each other at the dinner table, she murmured, "You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Ridiculous, Caleb," she added with a scoff. I almost laughed. "Ridiculous?" I leaned in, my voice ice cold. "Is that what you think this is?" "Avery, I've got the evidence. Photos, messages, 3 different guys. I know all about the Pure app. You've been living a double life, sneaking around while pretending to be the devoted spouse. Don't—" My hands clenched, my words trembling with rage. "Don't you dare act like I'm the one being ridiculous." She tightened her mouth into a line, arms crossed defiantly. "I was miserable," she said under her breath. "You stopped noticing me." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Oh, I notice you now, believe me, just not in the way you were hoping." Her eyes flickered, suddenly uncertain. She sensed I wasn't done, that something was coming. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wasn't ready to reveal my hand. Not yet. I wanted her to simmer in that quiet, unnerving suspense. Let her mind wander to all the ways I could retaliate. What she didn't know was that her betrayal gave me every advantage. We lived in a state where cheating mattered, where judges weighed infidelity when deciding money, property, and custody. And thanks to my private investigator, I had every piece of damning evidence I needed. But I wasn't interested in fairness. I wanted vengeance, so I played it cool. For an entire week, I put on a show, composed, patient, seemingly forgiving. And Avery, so sure of her charm, fell for it. She thought I was softening, warming up to a reasonable deal. One night, she eased onto the couch next to me, syrup in her voice. "Caleb," she said sweetly, her hand resting gently on my knee. Maybe we don't need to fight this out. Maybe there's a better way. I gave her a thoughtful look. A compromise? I echoed. She lit up. Yes, there's no reason to make this messy. We can work it out, just us. I nearly laughed in her face. After months of sneaking around and humiliating me, she wanted to smooth things over like we were civil friends catching up over coffee. Classic Avery. She had no idea what was coming. While she thought she was leading me to some peaceful middle ground, I was baiting the hook. I was setting a trap she wouldn't see until it was too late. I met with my attorney, Nora, and spelled out exactly how we were going to dismantle Avery's future. Freeze all joint accounts, I told her. I don't want her touching a penny. Nora nodded. Good. What's next? I'm keeping the house, I said flatly. She can have the car and whatever random crap she wants, but the house stays with me. Nora smirked. Since she's the one who cheated, her legal footing's weak. Exactly. Avery thought she was manipulating me. In reality, she'd walked straight into a perfectly planned ambush, and the best was yet to come. Because Avery hadn't just cheated on me with strangers. One of her affairs, Daniel, was married, and I made it my mission to find his wife. Took some work, but eventually I tracked her down. Renee, kind, unsuspecting. Had no idea her husband was shacking up with mine in sleazy motels. So I set up a meeting. We met in a quiet cafe downtown. She looked at me across the table, polite but confused. I'm sorry, but why did you want to meet? I slid a manila folder toward her. You deserve to know what your husband's been doing. She hesitated before taking it. Her hands trembled as she opened it and flipped through the contents. Photo after photo of Daniel and Avery, embracing outside bars, sharing drinks, caught in moments no wife should have to see. Her face went pale. No, she whispered. No, he wouldn't. He did, I said, sipping my coffee. That's why I'm ending my marriage. Her eyes filled with tears. She clutched the folder like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I need to leave, she stammered, getting up quickly. I need... Renee, I said softly but firmly. I've got a proposition for you, I said. She froze mid-step. I moved closer, letting the dim light carve sharp angles across my face. Do you want to destroy them? Renee faltered. Doubt flickered in her eyes at first. But as I laid it all out, every calculated point, every deliberate move, her uncertainty gave way to something else. Determination. By the time I finished, the tears had vanished. What remained in their place was resolve. No longer fragile or shaken, she was ready to strike. Together, we orchestrated a merciless pinpoint operation designed to bring Avery and Daniel to absolute ruin. It all started with the proof. We mailed unmarked envelopes, photos, chat logs, entire conversation threads, to Daniel's office, to Avery's family, to anyone remotely connected to them. In just a few days, Avery's pristine image shattered. The woman once admired became a pariah. Daniel's fate was worse. His wife tore him apart. She didn't just leave him, she gutted him. She filed for divorce, evicted him, and submitted every sordid detail to his employer, where marital fidelity wasn't a guideline, it was a contractual obligation. By Friday, Daniel had lost his wife, his job, and his reputation. Avery? She was left utterly alone, but I wasn't done yet. The night she realized just how far she had fallen, she showed up at my door. Her makeup ran in dark streaks down her cheeks, her eyes wide and terrified. Caleb, she gasped, please. I made a mistake. I folded my arms, looking at her like she was something rotting on the pavement. A mistake? I said, my tone ice cold. Losing your wallet is a mistake. Forgetting to return a call. You didn't make a mistake, Avery. You made a choice, over and over again. She crumbled in front of me, sobbing uncontrollably. I just want to fix things, she pleaded. I laughed, a harsh, guttural sound that cut through the night like a blade. "Fix this?" I stepped in close, towering over her. "You wrecked everything. You betrayed everything we had. You turned into the very thing you used to hate, a fraud, a traitor. And now you're begging for forgiveness?" She nodded, desperate, clinging to whatever sliver of hope she had left. I leaned forward, my voice a whisper, but sharp enough to pierce. "I want you to remember this moment for the rest of your life. You, on your knees, asking me for another chance." Then I stepped back, eyes hard as steel. "Because this is the last second you'll ever get from me." And I slammed the door shut. That sound, the finality of wood meeting frame, should have felt like the end. But it didn't. I stood just inside, breathing hard, fists balled tight, listening to her quiet sobs through the door. I thought watching her unravel would bring peace, a sense of justice, relief. Instead, there was nothing but silence, a cold, echoing void. Maybe because deep inside I understood what she didn't. This wasn't closure. It was only the beginning of her descent. And I wasn't finished. I turned and walked into the darkened living room. The house felt alien now, larger, emptier. The same space where laughter once lived, where we raised our daughters and etched memories into the walls. Now it felt like a mausoleum. I poured myself a drink. The whiskey seared its way down like retribution in liquid form. My thoughts churned, rage, exhaustion, and a relentless, focused hatred. Avery hadn't paid enough. She'd detonated my entire world. Now I'd watch hers collapse into ashes. Image had always been Avery's currency. Elegance, poise, the illusion of perfection. She breathed validation like it was air. So what happens when that illusion is obliterated? When everyone sees her for who she truly is? I picked up the phone and called Renee, Daniel's now ex-wife. She answered instantly, her voice sharp and steady. "It's time," I said. No hesitation. "Let's finish what we started." That same night, the reckoning began. The files from the private investigator, the damning texts, the precise timeline, all uploaded anonymously. No names attached, just the truth laid bare. Affairs disguised as business meetings, hotel rooms booked under aliases, calendar entries cloaked in lies. By morning, whispers had started. By midday, the storm had broken. The women's group Avery had led for years exiled her. No one wanted proximity to a fraud. Her social circle disintegrated. Friends distanced themselves. Family withdrew. And then came the coup de grace. Her career. A photo surfaced. Her leaving a hotel with a business associate tied to her employer. Within 48 hours, HR called her in. By week's end, she was unemployed. No allies, no network, no grace left to save face, just remorse and solitude. Even then, I wasn't done. One final thread remained. Jenna and Kelsey, our daughters, had unwittingly contributed to the betrayal. Thinking they were fostering openness, they encouraged Avery to explore a modern kind of relationship. They had no idea they were handing her the lighter fluid for the fire that would consume our family. They were trying to make things right now. I didn't know if I was capable of forgiving them yet, but I wasn't going to keep hiding. So when Jenna's name flashed across my phone again after another missed call, I finally picked up. "Dad?" Her voice was tentative, fragile. "Can we talk? Just the two of us. Without Mom." I exhaled slowly. "Okay. Where do you want to meet?" I asked. She mentioned a cafe. 20 minutes later, I stepped inside and saw them both already seated in a dim corner booth, looking like they hadn't slept in days. Kelsey's face was blotchy from crying. Jenna looked hollow. They wore guilt like a second skin. I took a seat across from them without a word. Jenna cleared her throat. "We're sorry, Dad. Really." Kelsey wiped at her face with a crumpled tissue. "This isn't how we wanted things to go." I folded my arms. "But you still played your part in making it happen." They flinched. I leaned forward. my voice low and cutting. Let me ask you this. When you and your mother started tossing around the idea of opening up the marriage, did it ever once cross your minds to ask me how I felt about it? To find out if I wanted that life? Jenna's face twisted with shame. Mom said, she made it seem like you didn't care anymore, like she was completely alone. My jaw clenched. And you believed that? Kelsey's voice wavered. We were foolish. We thought confronting the truth might push you two to fix things. We didn't mean to make it worse. I gave a short, bitter laugh. This was your plan to bring us closer? Jenna looked down. No. It turned into a disaster. We're both sick about it. Dragging a hand across my face, I felt the weight of everything. They were still my daughters. I didn't believe they'd acted out of cruelty, but that didn't change the damage they helped inflict. I stared at them for a long moment. I'm not ready to forgive you. Kelsey stifled a sob. But I stopped her. But I'm not cutting you off completely either. Jenna exhaled, shaky and uncertain. So, what now? You give me space, I said plainly. You stay out of my life from here on. Let me heal on my own terms. They nodded, eyes red and damp, and for the first time in what felt like ages, the fire in my chest dimmed just a little. It wasn't closure. It wasn't peace. But it was something. The beginning of something. Then came Avery. When I saw her again, she looked like a shell of her former self. Her hair, once pristine, was now a tangled mess. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by cheap, worn-out garments. She had lost everything. And the most ironic part? She finally realized it was all her doing. She appeared on my doorstep like a ghost, unmoving, too afraid to knock. When I opened the door, she just stood there, tears streaking silently down her face. Please, she murmured. I met her gaze. Please what? She looked broken. I don't know, she said, her voice barely audible. I want my life back. I tilted my head. You mean the life you wrecked? She began to tremble. The silence between us grew dense, filled with all the consequences she never imagined would catch up with her. Then I gave her the only response I had left. It's over. Her face collapsed, and I shut the door in her face. That was the end. But she didn't leave right away. She stayed just beyond the door, weeping quietly, hugging herself like her own arms could protect her from the fallout. I watched through the peephole. I didn't feel fury or sadness, not even relief. Just nothing. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I walked away from the door. Eventually, the sound of her crying softened, and I heard the slow, defeated shuffle of her feet descending the porch. When I checked again, she was gone. Truly gone. But she hadn't hit bottom yet, not completely. There was still one last thing she hadn't lost: the money. She'd been surviving on what little savings she had left, probably believing she could bounce back. What she hadn't realized was that I'd already pulled out every support beam beneath her. She was unemployed, and HR had made sure that no new doors would open. No job, no allies, just the fallout of her own making. Her social circle had disintegrated, and whatever reputation she once clung to was now in shambles. I made sure to conclude the divorce strictly on my own terms. She walked away with only what the court mandated. No assets, no financial support, and certainly no trace of the opulent life she once flaunted so proudly. The woman who once thought she was untouchable was now completely powerless. She tried reaching out to a few of her former affairs, but unsurprisingly, not one of them responded. Daniel disappeared completely. Logan cut her off without a word. And that clown who used to go by Nacho's Man, he didn't even remember her name. Whatever spell she once cast had long since worn off. She was no longer the fantasy she'd pretended to be, just a discarded shadow of who she thought she was. Then came the cruelest blow. A mutual acquaintance told me Avery had moved into a dilapidated apartment near the city limits, from luxury high-rises to a crumbling one-bedroom with peeling paint and broken blinds. The irony? It was the very same seedy motel where she once carried out her betrayals. That place was now her home. I hadn't spoken to Jenna or Kelsey, not because my love for them had faded, but because I hadn't been ready to forgive. Then, one night, Kelsey appeared at my doorstep alone. She stood on the porch, pale and hesitant, holding a small envelope tightly in her hands. I paused at the door before stepping outside. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "Dad, I need to talk to you." I crossed my arms. "I'm listening." Her voice shook. I want to see Mom." My muscles tightened. Her eyes dropped. "She's not okay." I let out a dry, bitter laugh. "That's not my problem anymore." Pain flickered in her expression. I know this is all her fault. But seeing her like that, it made something click for me. "We all had a hand in this," she whispered. I stayed silent. Then she held the envelope out toward me. "It's a letter, from me and Jenna. We didn't trust ourselves to say it right, so we wrote it instead." I hesitated before finally taking it. Kelsey pressed her lips together, barely audible now. "We miss you, Dad." Before I could reply, she turned and walked away. I stood there long after the door had closed behind her, the envelope still in my hand. Eventually, I opened it. Every word inside was soaked with sorrow, regret, and a desperate yearning. As I read, the bitterness I'd carried for so long began to crack. Time passed. I slowly began rebuilding. I returned to work, reconnected with old friends. Brick by brick, I started to reconstruct the life Avery had tried to destroy. And then one afternoon, a final message came through, from an unlisted number. "Avery, I know you'll never forgive me, but I need to say this. I'm sorry. I destroyed everything, and I deserve where I ended up. I just hope you find peace someday." I stared at the message for a long time. I could have answered. I could have poured every ounce of rage into one final response. But instead, I did the only thing that felt right. I deleted it. Then, with a deep breath, I turned away from it all. And for the first time in years, I felt something lift. Avery was gone from my life. The betrayal, the grief, the weight of it all. It had finally lost its grip on me. And my daughters were coming back to me, slowly but surely. It wasn't perfect, but healing had begun. That evening, standing alone on the back porch as the sun cast warm streaks across the sky, I let the breath escape my lungs. Because for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. Avery had fallen, and I had finally risen. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.